Millionaire catches his cleaning lady's daughter dancing with his paralyzed daughter. What he did next shocked everyone. Get that girl out of here right now. David Morrison's voice echoed through the mansion's garden like thunder, causing little Luna to freeze in the middle of her impromptu dance. The 9-year-old girl, daughter of Carmen, the family's cleaning lady, had been caught playing with Sophie, the 7-year-old daughter of the millionaire who had been confined to a wheelchair for 2 years. What should have been an innocent moment of joy between two children turned into a scene of absolute embarrassment. Mr. Morrison, I apologize, Carmen appeared running from the kitchen, her hands still wet from washing dishes, her face red with shame. I don't want explanations. You were hired to clean my house, not to let your daughter disturb Sophie. David pointed at Luna with disdain. That girl has no manners to be around children of our social standing. Luna stood still, her big brown eyes filling with tears. At 9 years old, she already understood perfectly what those words meant. Sophie, on the other hand, stretched her little arms toward her friend, protesting from her wheelchair. Daddy, no. Luna is my friend. She made me laugh. Silence, Sophie. Go to your room now. David turned to Carmen. And you, control your daughter better or find another job. Carmen lowered her head, took Luna by the hand, and headed for the back exit. But something in the girl's gaze caught her attention. It wasn't submission. It was a strange determination for someone so young, as if she were engraving every word, every gesture of humiliation in her memory. As she walked away, pulled by her mother, Luna looked back one last time. Sophie continued to stretch her arms toward her, crying, while David pushed the wheelchair into the house with irritation. Why is he so mean, Mom? Luna asked when they were in the kitchen. Because some people are born thinking they're better than others, sweetie, Carmen replied, wiping her own tears. But one day you'll understand that those with a good heart always find a way to shine. What no one in that mansion could have imagined was that Luna would remember every detail of that day. And that 20 years later, when their paths crossed again, she would no longer be the frightened little girl who danced in the garden. If you're enjoying this story of overcoming adversity and don't want to miss what happens when Luna reunites with the Morrison family, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because what she did to turn that humiliation into her greatest victory will leave you speechless. 20 years have passed since that day in the garden of the Morrison mansion, but Luna has never forgotten the bitter taste of humiliation. Now 29, she walked through the corridors of the prestigious Children's Hope Hospital, wearing her white coat as a pediatric neurosurgeon, one of the youngest and most respected specialists in the country. Her mother, Carmen, had died 5 years earlier, a victim of cancer that could have been treated if she had had access to decent health insurance. During the last months of her life, while Luna was doing her medical residency, Carmen revealed painful details about the years they worked for the Morrisons. Daughter, that man didn't even pay us minimum wage. I accepted it because we needed the money, but he always treated us like we were less than human, Carmen whispered from her bed in the public hospital. Sophie was a sweet girl, but David Morrison, he took pleasure in humiliating us. Luna discovered that David had fired her mother just a week after that scene in the garden, claiming incompetence as an excuse for not paying her labor rights. Carmen never got another steady job after that. The name Morrison on her references was a mark of failure that followed her for years. He destroyed our lives for fun, Luna muttered to herself as she reviewed that morning's medical records. Her specialization in infantile paralysis was no coincidence. Every child she helped walk again was a small victory against the memory of that cruel man. Fate, however, has a peculiar sense of humor. The last file in the stack made Luna freeze. Sophie Morrison, 27 years old, progressive partial paralysis, requires urgent experimental surgery. Father, David Morrison, businessman. Emergency contact, same number. Luna laughed softly, a humorless sound that echoed through the empty room. After 2 decades, the universe was handing David Morrison to her on a silver platter. Sophie, now an adult, had developed a degenerative neurological condition that threatened to paralyze her completely. And Luna was literally the only surgeon in the country who specialized in that particular procedure. She picked up the phone and dialed the number. 3 rings and a familiar, though older, voice answered. Morrison. Mr. Morrison? This is Dr. Luna Rodriguez, neurosurgeon at Children's Hope. I need to speak with you about Sophie Morrison's case. There was a long pause. Luna could almost hear the gears of memory turning on the other end of the line. Rodriguez, That name sounds familiar. I imagine it would, Luna replied, her voice carefully neutral. My mother was Carmen Rodriguez. She worked in your house a few years ago. The silence that followed was deafening. When David finally spoke, his voice was tense. You're that cleaning lady's daughter? I'm Carmen Rodriguez's daughter, yes. And now I'm the only person who can save your daughter. Luna heard David's heavy breathing. 20 years of privilege and arrogance being confronted by the reality that the girl he had humiliated was now Sophie's only hope. Doctor, I need you to understand that. Oh, I understand perfectly, Mr. Morrison, Luna interrupted, savoring every word. I understand that you need me now. The difference is that this time, I make the rules. At that moment, as David Morrison struggled on the other end of the line between his wounded pride and the desperation of a father, Luna realized that the little girl who had once danced in the garden had grown up to become exactly what that cruel man feared most, someone with real power over his destiny. 3 days later, David Morrison walked into Children's Hope Hospital as if he owned the place. His $2,000 suit and Italian shoes echoed through the hallways with the authority of someone accustomed to buying solutions to any problem. At 62, with perfectly combed gray hair and an imperial posture, he radiated the kind of confidence that only decades of privilege can provide. I want to see the medical director, he announced to the receptionist, completely ignoring the line of families who had been waiting for hours. David Morrison, of Morrison Enterprises. It's about my daughter. The receptionist, a middle-aged black woman named Rosa, looked at him with the professional patience of someone who had dealt with many men like him. Sir, Dr. Williams is in surgery, but Dr. Rodriguez, who is in charge of your daughter's case, can see you in 15 minutes. I didn't come here to talk to subordinates, David replied dismissively. I want to talk to whoever's really in charge here. Rosa exchanged a meaningful glance with a nearby nurse. They were familiar with this type of behavior, but they also knew Dr. Rodriguez's reputation very well. Mr. Morrison, I can assure you that Dr. Rodriguez is one of the most respected surgeons in the country. She has saved the lives of hundreds of children. Look here, David leaned over the counter, lowering his voice to a threatening tone. I can buy this entire hospital if I want to. I'm not leaving my daughter's life in the hands of someone who, well, you understand. Rosa understood perfectly. 40 years of working in hospitals had taught her to recognize every nuance of prejudice disguised as legitimate concern. She discreetly pressed a button under the counter, a signal to Luna, who was watching everything through the security cameras in her office. Luna smiled for the first time in days. David Morrison hadn't changed a bit. He was still the same arrogant man who believed he could humiliate people and then buy his way out of the consequences. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she had memorized the day before. Dr. James Carter? This is Luna Rodriguez. I need that favor you owe me. Carter, one of San Francisco's most feared lawyers and a specialist in medical malpractice, had been her college classmate. Luna had saved his daughter from permanent paralysis 2 years earlier, refusing any payment. For you, Luna, anything. What do you need? I want you to investigate David Morrison of Morrison Enterprises. Everything. Taxes, labor practices, questionable contracts. Especially how he's treated domestic workers over the last 3 decades. Morrison. That name rings a bell. Isn't that the one who had problems with the Department of Labor a few years ago? Luna felt her heart race. Tell me more. Several complaints of domestic worker exploitation. Below minimum wages, unfair dismissals, unsanitary conditions. All hushed up with money, but the lawsuits are there. I can have detailed reports in 48 hours. Meanwhile, downstairs, David was losing patience. Sophie had arrived at the hospital in an ambulance the night before, her condition rapidly deteriorating. The doctors were clear, without the experimental surgery, she had at most 6 months before complete paralysis. Dad, please, Sophie begged from her bed in the private room David had demanded. Dr. Rodriguez has an incredible reputation. I read about her online. She's literally the only person in the country who does this surgery. Daughter, you don't understand. That woman. She has a history with me. I can't trust her. What kind of history? Sophie furrowed her brow. At 27, with a journalism degree from Columbia, she had inherited her father's intelligence, but not his arrogance. Dad, how do you know her? David looked away. It's complicated. Old business. But Sophie wasn't easily fooled. She grabbed her laptop and started researching. Within 20 minutes, she found articles about Dr. Luna Rodriguez's inspiring journey. Daughter of a cleaning lady, first in her family to graduate from college, Harvard-trained pediatric neurologist, responsible for developing revolutionary surgical techniques. Dad, Sophie said slowly, Rodriguez is a very common last name, but do you remember a cleaning lady named Carmen Rodriguez who worked for us many years ago? David's silence was deafening. Sophie continued typing, and then her eyes widened. Oh my God. It's her, isn't it? It's Carmen's daughter. Sophie, this isn't. Do you remember her daughter? Luna? The girl who used to make me laugh when I was in my wheelchair. David felt the blood drain from his face. 20 years had passed, but he remembered that day in the garden perfectly. The 9-year-old girl he had publicly humiliated, yelling at her as if she were less than human. Dad, what did you do? Sophie's voice was heavy with a growing, horrible realization. At that moment, Luna appeared in the doorway. Wearing her white coat, stethoscope around her neck, she was the very picture of professional success. Her eyes met David's with the same serenity she had shown at age 9, but now behind that calm, he could see something that made him swallow hard. Good afternoon, Mr. Morrison, Luna said in a perfectly professional voice. Sophie, how are you feeling? Sophie looked between her father and Luna, slowly understanding the dynamic unfolding before her. Dr. Rodriguez, I want to apologize for anything There's nothing to apologize for, Sophie, Luna interrupted gently. You've always been a sweet child. You always have. David watched this exchange, realizing that he was completely losing control of the situation. The girl he had humiliated now dominated the hospital where his daughter needed treatment. Even worse, Sophie clearly remembered Luna fondly. So, Luna turned to David, have we discussed your treatment options? David swallowed his anger and tried to regain some authority. I want a second opinion. Another doctor. Of course, Luna replied calmly. The next most qualified specialist is in Boston. Dr. Mitchell can see her in 3 weeks. Maybe 4. Sophie groaned. Dr. Rodriguez, 3 weeks could be too late, right? Luna nodded. Unfortunately, yes. This condition progresses rapidly. It was at that moment that David realized he had been cornered. Luna didn't need to push anything. She simply needed to wait for medical reality to do the work for her. And for the first time in decades, David Morrison understood what it meant to be completely at the mercy of someone he had underestimated. Luna left some forms on the bedside table. Think about it. I have other surgeries today, but I'll be available tomorrow to discuss the procedure if you decide to proceed. As she turned to leave, her eyes met David's one last time. In that look, he saw decades of quiet determination, years of relentless study, and something deeper, the calculating patience of someone who had waited 20 years for the perfect moment. Oh, Mr. Morrison, Luna paused at the door, you might be interested to know that I have documented my professional career extensively over the years, including the humble origins that brought me here. It's amazing how certain childhood experiences can shape a person's character forever. After she left, David was alone with Sophie and the crushing weight of irony. The girl he had considered unworthy of being in his daughter's presence was now the only person in the world who could save her. The next morning, Luna arrived at the hospital carrying a brown leather briefcase and a smile David couldn't quite decipher. Sophie had had a difficult night, with muscle spasms that indicated the rapid progression of her condition. Time was running out fast. Good morning, Mr. Morrison, Luna greeted him cordially, placing the briefcase on the bedside table. I brought some documents for us to discuss before the surgery. David frowned. What kind of documents? Oh, just some interesting findings about your company. My lawyer, Dr. Carter, is very thorough in his research. Luna opened the folder with deliberately slow movements. For example, we discovered that between 2005 and 2015, your company was the target of 47 complaints to the Department of Labor for exploitation of domestic workers. David's blood ran cold. Sophie, even in her weakened state, sat up straighter in bed. Dad, what is she talking about? Luna pulled a document from the folder. Wages below the legal minimum, unfair dismissals to avoid paying benefits, unhealthy working conditions. 47 families affected. She paused dramatically. Including mine. That has nothing to do with medical treatment, David stammered, but his voice betrayed his growing desperation. Oh, but it has everything to do with it, Mr. Morrison. Luna turned a page. Because among those 47 families, 23 had children who were unable to complete high school due to financial difficulties caused by his exploitative practices. 15 families lost their homes. 8 children developed health problems due to lack of access to adequate health care. Sophie had tears in her eyes. Dad, is this true? David couldn't answer. Luna continued, pulling out another document. But most interesting, Mr. Morrison, is this email your personal assistant sent to Human Resources in 2006. Luna read aloud, David Morrison requests that any domestic employee who submits references from the Morrison family be automatically disqualified for positions at partner companies. Justification: corporate confidentiality issues. David's breathing became shallow. This was an informal blacklist, ensuring that anyone he fired would never get a decent job again. 47 families, Mr. Morrison. 47 lives systematically destroyed. Luna closed the document. My mother never got another steady job after you fired her. She died at 58, working as an outsourced cleaning lady with no job security, because her name was on that blacklist. Sophie sobbed quietly. Dad, how could you? You don't understand, daughter. Business is. David tried to justify himself, but Luna interrupted him. Business. Luna laughed, but there was no humor in her voice. Mr. Morrison, I spent 20 years preparing for this moment. 20 years studying, specializing, becoming irreplaceable in the only medical field that could save your daughter. You want to talk about business? David realized with growing horror that he had been completely duped. The 9-year-old girl he had humiliated had not only survived, she had become strategically superior to him. Dr. Carter also discovered something interesting about your finances, Luna continued, pulling out a red folder. It seems that the Internal Revenue Service is very interested in certain discrepancies in your tax returns between 2010 and 2020, especially the unreported expenses for domestic staff. You're blackmailing me, David managed to whisper. Blackmail would be using this to get something I want, Luna replied calmly. But I already have everything I want, Mr. Morrison. I have a brilliant career, international recognition, and the ability to save lives. Including Sophie's. Sophie looked between her father and Luna, beginning to understand the complex dynamic unfolding before her. So what do you want? David asked, defeated. Justice, Luna replied simply. I want you to experience for a few moments what it means to depend completely on the kindness of someone who has every reason to deny you help. Luna turned to Sophie. Sweetheart, your surgery is scheduled for tomorrow at 7 in the morning. Dr. Williams will be my chief assistant, and we have an 85% chance of complete success. Sophie's eyes widened. You're going to operate on me? Even after everything my father did. Sophie, you are not responsible for your father's sins, Luna said gently. And I did not become a doctor to deny treatment to those who need it. I became a doctor to heal, regardless of who my patient's parents are. David was visibly shaken. Why are you doing this? Luna looked him straight in the eye. Because, Mr. Morrison, the difference between us is simple. You use your power to destroy people. I use mine to heal them. And when Sophie walks out of this surgery, she will understand that true strength does not come from humiliating others, but from overcoming them. She closed the folder and headed for the door. Oh, Mr. Morrison, one last thing. Dr. Carter will be submitting the complete documentation of your labor practices to the Department of Labor on Monday, and to the Internal Revenue Service on Tuesday, considering that the statute of limitations has not yet expired on several of these violations. David felt his legs tremble. Decades of systematic exploitation were about to come crashing down on him. But don't worry, Luna smiled for the first time, a genuine smile as she looked at Sophie. Your daughter will be walking long before your court hearings begin. She'll need her legs working to visit you in prison. In that moment, as David Morrison finally understood that the 9-year-old girl had grown up to become the worst nightmare of his conscience, one question remained unanswered. Was it possible that a man who had spent decades destroying lives could learn something about redemption by seeing his own daughter saved by the compassion of someone who had every reason to hate him? 6 months after the surgery that saved Sophie Morrison, Luna walked through the hospital corridors with a different energy. The operation had been a complete success. Sophie had not only regained full movement in her legs, but had become one of the most motivated patients Luna had ever treated. The young woman had used her experience to become a passionate advocate for workers' rights, writing articles that exposed the exploitative practices her own father had perpetuated. Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Williams called, approaching her with a gold envelope. The official confirmation has arrived. The Physician of the Year award is yours. It's the first time anyone under 30 has ever received this honor. Luna smiled, remembering the 9-year-old girl who had once been deemed unworthy of being in the presence of children of higher social standing. The irony was delicious. The same determination that David Morrison had tried to crush was now propelling her to the top of her profession. And there's more, Dr. Williams continued. The documentary about your life, from cleaning to surgery, has been nominated for an Emmy for Best Social Rights Documentary. Sophie Morrison is one of the executive producers. At that very moment, across town, David Morrison was signing the final papers of his personal bankruptcy. Dr. Carter's investigations had revealed decades of tax evasion and labor exploitation. The IRS fines alone had consumed 70% of his net worth. The labor lawsuits filed by the 47 families he had wronged drained the rest. Mr. Morrison, said his former lawyer, putting away the documents, I regret to inform you that I can no longer represent you in the criminal proceedings. Your remaining assets do not cover our fees. David looked out the window of the small apartment where he now lived. The view was no longer the mansion with gardens where he had once humiliated a girl for dancing with his daughter. It was a view of dirty bricks and overflowing trash cans. At 63, he faced the real possibility of prison for the labor crimes he had committed over decades. Sophie had completely removed herself from his life, legally taking her mother's last name and cutting all financial ties to him. Dad, she had said in their last conversation, I need to build a life based on values you never taught me. Luna showed me that true strength doesn't come from destroying others, but from lifting them up. Meanwhile, Luna was being interviewed live on national television about her journey. Dr. Rodriguez, asked the host, how does it feel to know that your story has inspired thousands of young people from underserved communities to pursue medicine? I believe that every injustice we face can become fuel for our determination, Luna replied calmly. When David Morrison humiliated me at age 9, he believed he was putting me in my place. In fact, he was motivating me to find a place far greater than he could ever imagine. The camera captured her serene smile. Today, I run one of the most important medical scholarship programs in the country, specifically for children of domestic workers. We have already graduated 50 doctors who, like me, came from families that suffered labor exploitation. The following week, newspaper headlines told parallel stories. Former millionaire sentenced to 8 years in prison for labor exploitation, occupied the crime section, while Brazilian doctor receives International Human Rights Award, dominated the front page. Sophie, now with her legs fully recovered, ran every morning through the same garden where her friend Luna had been humiliated 20 years earlier. The mansion now belonged to a foundation Sophie had created to house vulnerable domestic worker families. The irony was poetically perfect. The place that once symbolized exclusion and privilege was now a symbol of inclusion and social justice. Luna always says that the best revenge is not to become like your oppressor, but to surpass him in such a way that his very existence becomes proof that he was wrong, Sophie explained during a lecture at Harvard on social transformation. My father tried to break the spirit of a 9-year-old girl. Instead, he forged one of the most important surgeons of her generation. On the last day before David was taken to prison, he received an unexpected letter. It was from Luna. The message was simple but devastatingly powerful. Mr. Morrison, when I was 9 years old, you said I didn't have the education to be around children of our social standing. Today, I head the neurosurgery department at the hospital where your daughter was saved. I chair a foundation that has changed the lives of thousands of families like mine, and I am considered one of the most influential doctors in the country. You were right about one thing. I really didn't belong in your social position. My place has always been far above hers. Thank you for showing me, even if unintentionally, that true education doesn't come from the cradle, but from the determination to turn every no into fuel for an even bigger yes. With professional respect, Dr. Luna Rodriguez. David folded the letter slowly, finally understanding the full extent of his defeat. He had tried to crush a seed, but had only planted a tree whose fruits would feed entire generations. 5 years later, Luna opened the Carmen Rodriguez Institute of Social Medicine, named in honor of her mother. Sophie cut the inaugural ribbon, walking with steady, confident steps. In her opening speech, Luna looked out at the audience filled with young doctors, students from humble families, and social activists. "My mother used to say that some people are born thinking they are better than others," Luna said into the microphone. "But she also taught me that those with good hearts always find a way to shine." Today, at this institute, we continue to prove that she was right. True greatness is not born of privilege, but of the ability to turn adversity into opportunity, humiliation into motivation, and prejudice into purpose. The audience rose to a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Among those present were hundreds of young people from disadvantaged communities who now had full scholarships to study medicine, all inspired by the story of the girl who turned rejected dance into a garden and a silent revolution that changed lives forever. Luna had discovered the perfect formula for revenge, not to destroy those who had hurt her, but to build something so extraordinary that the very existence of that legacy would become the definitive proof that her oppressors were completely wrong about who she really was. If this story of transformation and justice touched your heart, leave a comment telling us which part moved you the most, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that true victory is not in bringing our enemies down, but in elevating ourselves so high that they become irrelevant in the face of the greatness we have built.